Hello and welcome to Let's Talk with Sara, and I'm your host, Rahayu Saraswati. And tonight we're having a special live streaming segment for the first time. We are doing it in English, and I am joined this evening with by some very special girls. Okay, ladies, not no longer girls. It's like ladies. We have the founders or the co-founders of Uncovering Indonesia Podcast. And so, as you can probably guess, I won't be the one asking questions this evening, but the tables will be turned, and these ladies will be the ones asking me questions. And we have Syafirah Reihana, who is a lawyer and co-founder of Uncovering Indonesia, and of course we have Louise Kalista Iskandar, who is a third runner-up for Putri Indonesia. So we have maybe you guys introduce yourselves and what Uncovering Indonesia is all about.
Right. Okay. Hi. Thank you so much. First, thank you, Sara, for taking time out to discuss with us about this
RUPKS,
this sexual abuse eradication bill. So our podcast, Uncovering Indonesia, we basically uncover, bring to light issues, current events in Indonesia, trending topics in English. And so we don't see a lot of that. It's on Bahasa, so we want to actually accommodate to English speakers as well.
I think
it's kind of in line with what Let's Talk with Sara is all about, because
exactly.
we did start this show in English because I wanted to get that out there too. So we're on the same page.
Yes,
do more collaborations in the future.
Yes, that would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Yeah, so we understand that you were part of the working group for this bill. So, and you were a member when you were a member of the DPR yourself last term, and you're an activist fighting for women empowerment. So we think you're the perfect person to discuss this RUPKS with. And so in our podcast, we kind of already made a bit of an introduction on what it is. But a lot of people are really wondering about what is so difficult about it. So we want to know the deets. We want to know the inner workings of it, and you are perfect. Yeah, your point.
And it's a good thing. I guess it's a good thing I'm no longer in Parliament. Otherwise, I won't be able to say as much.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I think.
Everything. We got the tea for you, all of it in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. So so that brings us to our first question. So from your point of view as Anggota Panja, what are the biggest reasons, let's say top 3, that the RUPKS keeps on failing? How did it get rejected and delayed so many times?
I don't even have to go to 3, but I can come up with the number 1 issue. Okay, it's really just one issue. it's not that complicated. It only seems to be complicated to people who are in denial. So let me try to explain it in the simplest terms. In Indonesia, and I'm putting this for our friends abroad who might, or even the expats who are living here in Indonesia, who might not understand necessarily about our laws, okay, or even our country. Yeah. So number 1 is that there is no separation of state and religion, or state and church, as they would say in America, but it's state and religion. There is no separation of that here in Indonesia. It is entrenched within our constitution. It's entrenched within our the fiber of how Indonesia came to be, right? So it's difficult when we're talking about laws without talking about ideologies. Now, so when it came to something as sensitive as this, and why is it sensitive, right? That's number 1. I mean, the understanding, so this is where several layers come in. It's not that the reason's different, but the layers. There are layers to the same reason. Okay, so the reason being understanding of ideologies or dogmas and perspectives of certain ideologies. Okay, it's so within that, obviously there are different layers. Like, for example, gender roles, gender equality, or what does it mean to be a woman within a certain ideology.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, of course, on another level, we're talking about how whether or not our law can go that much into people's private lives, right? Because this is very much an in your face when we're talking about sexual abuse. I mean, we saw the Me Too movement in America, and how even with as we would say, that how progressive they are in terms of gender equality, etc., but they are still dealing with gender inequalities even until this day. And just to give you a perspective, in Indonesia, we have national laws in place for maternity leave. In America, they do not. So it's not, again, so often they think like, oh my gosh, Indonesia's so primitive, and it's so like, no, I mean, like, let's put it into perspective. It just is just that we do have gender equality. We do have like maternity leave, daycares need to be, implementation is probably, the problems and the issue in terms of laws. I have to hold really quickly. Where was I? As I was saying, when it comes to something as sensitive, an issue as sexual abuse, and especially because when we're talking about sexual abuse, the reality is the majority of victims are women. And when we saw, like, for example, the Me Too movement, that also brings that, I'm sure that brought out fears within leadership positions. Okay. And that is also what happened here. So, okay, I lied when I said there was only really one reason. Okay, there might have been two, but it's all connected. So the second reason, the first being, of course, the ideology and understanding of that ideology, the dogma of that ideology, their perspective on it, which makes it very difficult for us to debate, because you can't compromise and meet anywhere in the middle when it's simply something that is based on people's beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's your belief or their belief, but it's so it's like, you can't say like, oh, that's wrong, because then you're saying that that person's belief is wrong, and so that's how it gets really difficult. Right. But then when we're talking about the second issue, it would be fears. And what I mean by fears, there are men, let's just be honest, the ones who, there were, mostly it was men. I mean, there were some women who we know that who are against it, but the men are basically scared, and I understand where they're coming from, because of false accusations that could come out from this, used by people to bring people in leadership positions down. Because again, in Indonesia, and unfortunately it's just the case around the world as well, when someone's name is tarnished by just an accusation, it's not yet proven, but just accusations can ruin a person's reputation, right? So we do understand all of that, and yet the issue is victims are there. We do have loopholes within the laws that are in place, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, because the ones who are basically against this bill, aside from those that I answered, then their reasoning, among others, would be about, aside from their ideology, is about again the whole what is it, abuse of power, right? Abuse of power. But it's also they're thinking that there are already laws in place to fight these sexual abuse, right? Whether it's in the We call it PKDRT, which is basically the domestic abuse, right, eradication bill, which has been passed. So, and you know what's really funny? I have to be honest. There are some not well parliamentarians, right, representatives, who still argue the point of whether or not women can be raped in marriage, even today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, I actually had to hold myself back a few times and not shout at them and say, like, we do have the freaking domestic abuse eradication law in place. It's not new.
Exactly.
You know, so if you want to argue it, you're too late. It's already done.
I think
exactly.
the thing about it is, I think a lot of people also assume that everyone, like, we all want this, but everyone has a happy marriage, which is not the case, unfortunately. Like, as you said, PKDRT, there's a lot of issues and a lot of women that, or men even, children that need to be protected, you know? And I think, like, what you were saying about the tarnish, it fits so well. I mean, we were talking about this in our podcast, in our second episode, Karina was mentioning it, that the good thing about it is in the process, there's two evidence, right? You can prove it that this is not you, and in any case, you have nothing to worry about at the end of the day, you know. But
yeah,
I think,
but again, you know, as I said, sometimes, and this is the problem within Indonesia itself, and it's also in some other countries. Some people don't care about whether it's true or not. So that, you know, it's to do with how easy it is for us to spread hoax and false information.
And it's always the first impression.
Because we don't necessarily have the education system in place that teaches them critical thinking. And that's a huge issue we're dealing with. Okay. So what you know, in terms of the laws in place, for example, when we're talking about a child, right, being abused, they would say, oh, we already have the children's protection law in place, and then they would use that as a reason not to push this law forward. But what and this is something that I think Reina needs to explain to the rest of us who are being lawyer, right? Like, you know, if you've read the bill, you'll understand why there are some lawyers and there, you know, especially activists who are fighting against, violence against women and children, why the laws in place are not enough and why there are loopholes that need to be covered by this bill.
Exactly. And I think what I also really like about the bill is the fact that it's not just about criminalizing it or protecting the victims. It's also the education, the mitigation. That's the important part. The education, that's what we need. I mean, we can't change the law. We change the mindset again. So I think it's completely true. Everyone can find a loophole in anything. But the thing is, we need to start with that, teaching the generation, teaching even the officials and school children about this sexual abuse.
But then you're bringing up another point. I have to point out that debate and that view is why then there are those who are against this bill who came up with another bill.
Really?
Oh yeah. So that was already happening a few months ago. Okay, at the beginning of this period, of the new period, of this term. Sorry. So is that they're very much so. They are very much they are in agreement when it comes to the prevention aspect. Okay, but when it comes to the definitions, they have. That's where the conflict comes in. Now, because they're in agreement with the prevention aspect is why some of them came up with the RUU Ketahanan Keluarga.
Which we could say is problematic in many aspects as well.
Believe it.
Yes. But that's the train of thought that you had, Reina. Was the justification they used to come up with this bill.
That's right.
Even though this bill is not new, this bill has been around for a while, but it finally came to the surface recently because of the controversy of the sexual abuse eradication bill.
I guess that also brings me to the second question then, because you were mentioning that they use these reasons. I mean, so here's what I asked you: who were the male legislators actually against the bill?
So it's you know what? There wasn't like one specific. The one that we know, of course, is fraksi PKS, right?
Yeah.
The Partai Kesejahteraan Sosial.
Mhm.
So we did I say that right? It's like it's so many keadilan. Oh my
Right?
gosh! Like it's
Yeah.
keadilan sosial. Okay, I like they're gonna kill me. I'm like sorry, I forgot what your
We should
partai.
we should point out they have the same acronym as the name of the bill, guys. The
Yeah.
same acronym here,
Well,
which
that's
is
why,
ironic.
to be honest, I never call it RUU PKS from the
Yeah.
very beginning. I call it RUU Penghapusan KS. So the only one that I put together is the KS. So
Okay.
and they also protest about it as well, actually, for people to call it RUU PKS because their partai is called PKS.
Yeah.
So they are openly against this bill. They are openly against it. But here's the thing: it's not just them who are against it. When I was in the working group, it was clear that the majority of the representatives were against it. Okay, there were really only a couple of us. I mean, the main fighters in the working group at that time was myself and Diah Pitaloka, because both of us are basically representatives of our faction, so we do have sway for
Yeah.
our faction. We're the ones who speak on behalf of our faction within the commission,
Yeah.
within the Eighth Commission. And you and as I was talking about this to the organizations and civil societies who are fighting for this bill, I had to explain to them, like, you need to understand the hierarchy
Yeah.
of the politics that are happening in the House of Representatives. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your energy lobbying the wrong people.
Yeah.
Because but the issue is the people who were active, who were attending the meetings, most of them were against this bill. And again, as I said, the even though there were like two reasons, right? But it all came down to the one reason that is the most effective is the ideological battle. They don't agree um, on the definitions that we have, and then because they are saying that basically women do not have rights over their own bodies.
That
Okay, that's at the
That's
very bottom of it all. They do not agree with that.
Yeah.
They do think that what they've been taught and their the perspective and the dogmas and so their ideology has taught them that that is what is right.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and here's the thing: it's not just men. There were women as well who were against this bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you can see that when there were demonstrations, the demonstrators that they sent forward were women. Okay,
Yeah.
it's very important that we see this. It's not it's not necessarily a sexist issue. You see
Yeah.
what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like gender issue, but it becomes that because of the ideology.
So it's basically blurring the lines whether or not the fight is so-called against the liberals and the conservatives, or whether it's for women fighting their rights against the chauvinists.
or
So
is it
there's that line, basically. But in your
Yeah, well,
opinion, what is
because
it more
when you're
tending?
talking about when you're talking about ideologies, how can you say someone is a chauvinist when
Yeah.
they firmly believe that that is what is right,
Yeah.
I
But
get
we,
it.
right? And
yeah.
you know what they said as well? They even accused me of receiving money from the West.
Really? That's
Yeah,
Because it's that much of a
what I
foreign
heard
issue for
was
them.
they accused me of receiving like 40 billion rupiah or something.
Oh my gosh. I think that really
That's
shows the
ridiculous.
ideologies that they hold there. Like at the end of the day, it's the difference of opinions that makes it hard because how forthcoming you are with your opinions at the end.
Yeah.
I It's funny to say that you mentioned because a lot of DPR, they were actually, majority was against it. Now, what about people like MPR or other politicians, like say, for instance, Ketua MPR, Pak Bambang, what would you say was his?
I don't know about like now this period, but in the previous ones, I mean, you can kind of read between the lines, because if you look at the factions, you do understand where the party lines are.
Yeah.
And this is it's, and yet at the same time, I don't want to generalize it, because there are people fighting for it, like women specifically fighting for this bill within not each but most of the factions and most of the parties. But it's this is we can't like put, I'm trying to like get the right words out there.
Put it in a box specifically.
Not that I'm like, being diplomatic, but I just want to make sure that we understand that it's very individuals, right? It's not a general thing. Like we can't just say, oh, they're all like that, because in each faction, I can tell you, in each faction there were people who were against it. And if you're talking about MPR and DPR, well, obviously it doesn't really matter, because DPR has the final say. DPD can only fight for it, but the leaders of the MPR are basically DPR people.
Yeah,
It's true.
Right. So DPD only has a right to propose a bill or a legislation, but they cannot. Sometimes they're involved in the discussion, but they do not have a final say at all.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's also what I mean by, when we're lobbying, when we're advocating, we need to understand the hierarchy, and we need to understand the placing, so that we do not waste on our energy lobbying people who do not have a say in something.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think if we discuss about the opposition based on ideology, we're probably not going to get anywhere, because that's their ideology, that's their belief. But let's talk about the misinformation out there. I mean, why has there been so much misinformation? We want to know exactly.
Well, partly it's because of the reasons that they have against this, and then they came up with, and they're kind of like light up a fire, right? And make sure that that misinformation is exactly part of the reason why they have such a strong following and such a strong support to go against this bill. So they're not interested in ensuring people are educated about how bills are made and what it means. They just want it gone.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it all starts from that, and that's why I said all the reasons come down to that one reason. I mean, yes, there were and there are those who are afraid of this being used against them, and I'm not necessarily saying that it's because they are afraid of false accusations, because it might be true. Right? Because they might. Let's just be honest. I know some people who have had accusations against them for sexual harassment and etc. So I'm sure there are those who are afraid that this is going to bite them in the behind. So, but when we're talking about the misinformation, a lot of it is to do with the fact that they just want to use anything to get this off the table. Okay. And so far they are successful. Because, can you imagine like the misinformation about, they're only illegalizing, basically rape of same sex. But when they are having sex, mutual consent, then it's okay, which means that they are pro LGBTQ. Just something,
Ridiculous.
Something like that. But that's the thing. It's like it's there. I have to tell you as well. There are those who want to illegalize the existence of LGBTQ community here in Indonesia. They do not want them to exist here. We're basically seeing what happened in England, what happened in America years ago when they were basically criminalizing the LGBTQ community.
Exactly. And a part of the RUU Ketahanan Keluarga actually is addressing that, saying that LGBTQ should seek treatment. That's basically the beginning of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It stemmed from that, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, when we were looking at the process, you know how in the DPR website, there's that process where each bill is at. It kind of, I mean, I was shaking my head so hard when I saw the RUU Ketahanan Keluarga is way ahead of the Penghapusan KS. So
there were some weird ones that were prioritized this year, and I was like, I don't even know at that point, you know? It's like, okay.
Well, again, I have to remind all of you that these are the people who are voted in. They're elected officials, okay? So this is the reality that we are facing here in this country. You know, I have to say, like, we have a long way to go. And I'm sorry that I've become cynical and I've become quite pessimistic, but I was in there and I saw the kind of people who are chosen, who are basically voted in again. And these these people, you know, men or women, don't necessarily have the correct understanding about gender roles and gender equality, and about sexual abuse. So you know, and I'm not blaming people, but we do need to wake up. We do need to say, like, if you want this done, you gotta really start it at the grassroots level. You have to educate people, because these politicians will change their tune when the constituents demand them to change. Okay? Because they, at the bottom of it all, and maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but the bottom of it all, what they care about is votes.
exactly, themselves, their interests.
It's all entirely.
They want to be voted in again. And if they have a chance of losing votes because of a bill like this, they're not going to take that chance.
I think that's the thing, though. That's why it's like we have to change the mindset. And I remember, I think it was in RUPKS, it was they wanted to have something like sex education and training, you know, for the people that's going into office. Remember, I mean, I would say it as like, I remember when I was in SD, SMP, high school, there were classes on sex education, more in SD and SMP, because that's when the mind needs to grow the most. And I wouldn't see any opposition of why they shouldn't be trained and educated once again, now that there's so many more cases. I mean, even there's 9 forms now, and that's still not even half of it, probably, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It goes back to education, but even, you know, even those who have been fighting in the HIV/AIDS, you know, they know how difficult it is to get. And maybe I'll even say, I'm not going to use the word sex education. I use the word reproductive health education. It makes it less scary for those for the conservatives. They're like, friendlier. What, you're going to teach sex? It's like, no, it's reproductive health. You know, it's understanding the how do I put it, the risks that you put in place for yourself or for others when you have you know, unprotected sex, etc., etc. So you know, or when you have we call it pergaulan bebas, right? Or you know, you basically have you know, multiple partners, or you know, blah blah blah. So it is just a matter of getting even just that very basic information. We still have very different views, and so my hope is actually in the next generation. It's like, but right now in Indonesia, I mean, we're nowhere near Sweden or you know, hello Finland, or you know, where or you know, where we have young women leading, basically. You know, but we're nowhere near that. I mean, even the baby boomers haven't had their chance yet. And other countries are saying, move aside, baby boomers. It's time for like generation millennial, you know? So
So, I mean, I'm curious though. I think we can all agree that as a concept, we need this bill to pass. But what do you actually think about the working draft? Do you agree that this is ready? This working draft that's been circulated is ready, or do you agree that it needs to be discussed further? Because I mean, even if we discuss with people who are very supportive of this cause, a lot of them can say that there are some articles that need work. Like, for example, Article 12 on the definition of sexual harassment. It says it's basically verbal or physical act that relates to a body part or sexual desire that leaves the victim degraded and humiliated. But we know that sometimes that's too broad and that can easily be abused. Now, a lot of people are saying that it should be more direct. Like if we look at the law in Australia, they clearly define it as having sexual advances or requesting sexual favors. And they sometimes add an element of a warning. So the
Yes.
one that we have right now, Article 12, it's basically saying that innocent catcalling, although catcalling is not okay, but whistling could
Leave.
could satisfy the Article 12 element. So what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
No, here's the thing. It is not perfect. It is nowhere near perfect. And even after we discuss it, it won't be perfect because people have so many different views on what is needed
Yeah.
from this bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, put aside the ideologies, even within those who support it, have different views on what should be in place. And this is kind of like a frustration as well for those of us who have been fighting for it. We're like, dude, if you, if you can't even be united, like how can we expect other people to take us seriously?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I tend to be more of the moderate, which is basically that there are some of the articles in there that do not need to be in place. But at the same time, there are even some articles that I've proposed needs to be harsher. And what I mean by harsher is, for example, I would say that those who have used, basically sexual services, so basically the customers and the pimps, they need to be brought to justice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so so basically, because unfortunately our human trafficking law, TPPO, it's not covering that so well.
Yeah.
So that's why we have issues with the sex trafficking, part.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the sexual slavery, it's put in this one, and in this bill, and there's also a part about prostitution, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they make it clear that it's forced prostitution, whereas
Yeah.
I would even say, like, don't make it forced. Anything to do with prostitution,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, just
Yeah.
off, because that's, I mean, research and experience has shown that it has been successful in bringing down human trafficking numbers in countries like Finland and Sweden.
Yeah.
So so this is an ongoing debate, and that was, I mean, that was the point of having this bill put forward, was so we can have that discussion. We can't
Right.
even get there
That's
Yeah.
the
because for months the argument was on the title itself,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry to say, they were adamant on the title,
Yeah.
because the bottom line is a difference in ideology. They did not want this to go through. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think the bigger question is now that, so we all understand that now that it's actually not in Pro Math anymore, maybe then hopefully there's going to be more room to work on, as you said, and more room for negotiation. But now that that's off the table, what laws should we rely on now? Like, what, do we solely rely on?
I have to correct that. It is not off the table. It is in Balek right now, the legislation body, and it will be discussed in October, last I heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even though it's not being discussed in the Eighth Commission, it is going to be discussed in the legislation body. And there are people there, and we are lobbying right now to ensure that we have strong speakers for this bill in the legislation body when it comes time to it.
Yeah. Are you still lobbying? What is your role now? I mean, you're not in.
My role is basically like, the compor. How do you say it?
Motivator.
I'm the one that like I fan the flame, from the outside. I kind of, because, and I have to, and the last time I talked to other lobbyists, I basically told them, guys, here's the bottom line as well. We can talk about it until we're blue in the face, and I've gotten past that point. I mean, I was not only blue in the face, I was just done. I was honestly, I have no more energy for this. This is insane, whatever. But I said the only way to get through is if we have strong Muslim leaders, male Muslim leaders, male Muslim clerics, right?
Yeah.
Who will openly support this bill. If we don't have that, then I'm sorry to say it will remain difficult.
Yeah.
But say we do have one, they can easily be accused of not being Muslim enough. That's the problem, because again, it'll be back in the ideology.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day,
but there's no way that a woman, it keeps on being like, if it's just women who keep pushing this, it's not going to work. We need to have the men behind it.
Yeah.
Especially a woman from, a minority group. It's going to create problems as well. And this is why I said the most effective is to ensure that we do have male Muslim leaders, because at this point, they're looking at this as an ideological issue, not as a gender issue.
Yeah.
I think at the end, it was something similar to what you were saying.
Or I'm sorry to say, it's not as a sexual abuse issue, not the gender issue. Sorry.
But I think it's interesting that you mentioned that part, because I get it though. It goes back to, at this point, all these leaders are going to be looking at about who the voters, who are the voters going to vote for, and 90% of Indonesia is majority Muslim, and a lot of them will follow, what do they follow, based on who the leader is. So it's understandable. I think, though, I would still if there could be a cooperation between two ideologies, a compromise. That's always the idealistic form,
Yeah, but welcome to Indonesia.
Yeah.
Which is why I as soon as I was, I found out I was no longer, I didn't win my case in the Constitutional Court. And the last month and a half, because I was also the one, along with some others, fighting for the minimum age for marriage, where we had that. So I was basically the one calling all the factions to be like, all right, all you women, show up. get your faction leader to transfer you to the legislation body, and let's get this done. It really took a lot of, for something that we could have all agreed on, even that was difficult, because there were some who did not want to have a minimum age in place.
Yeah.
They honestly believe that even girls, teenagers, doesn't matter their age, they can be married. But this is the truth. I had to face in public, okay, in the meetings. You guys can go through all the meeting recordings and you can see there were people who said, oh, my mother is 14, was 14 when she got married and she's fine. And so this is what we face. This is what we are facing today. So so in terms of what my part in this is just the same as, I'm just here to tell the truth. I'm just here to open up. I'm like, this is what it needs to take. Stop beating around the bush. We just, if we all think that we need this, then you guys gotta get the right people to back this. So it's as it's not a political thing. It's very much an ideological thing.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's interesting. But I guess now that because we're still waiting until October, as you said. So prior to that, before all of this is enacted, what have we been relying on? Is it solely just PKDRT or PBBO, or are there other forms that you would say?
No, it's really it's those laws. We have the criminal, and here's the other thing as well. One of the reasons that they came forward was, oh, we can't discuss this now because we need to ratify the criminal codification.
Yeah.
The criminal code first. That was their reason. And then all of a sudden, of course, by the end of last term, also why I burnt out, aside from all these other bills, was the criminal code that was quite controversial, right?
Yeah.
So, on one hand, we have people who want to ensure that there are those who believe that everything and anything to do with crime needs to be in the criminal code. In a way, it does make sense because the law that we have in place is different from what they have in America, right? I mean, Reina, you can explain, like, between civil and what is it?
Different system.
The law, right? Civil law and
common
law, right?
Yeah.
So we have a very different system that we don't have juries. We only have judges. Okay. And there's jaksa, there's the, what do you call those? The attorneys, right? That are in place from not personal attorneys, but they are placed by the country, right?
Yeah.
So you can imagine, with the laws that we have in place right now, with the criminal code that we have in place, it has not been updated since the time of the freaking Dutch colony. Okay, let's just be honest. Okay, this is why we need to have it ratified, people. It's like, it's been 10 years. Now it's like 12 years in the making, So people are like, oh, it's too soon. It's too fast. I'm like, really? 10 years is too fast. Okay. We're way long overdue. Okay. Now, so there are those who use that as an excuse and say that unless that is in place first, because it is the lex generalis, we use that. All of those attorneys, right? They use that as their main blueprint for any crime done. Now, our argument is that there is no way we can put everything that we need in place in the lex generalis. We need to have it in the lex specialis. Okay, we need to have it in a specific law that is in place to talk about the whole issue of sexual abuse. But again, that's ideology in terms of law, not in terms of religion. So that we're also facing a challenge right there, because it's people have different ideologies on how the law in Indonesia should be in terms of the criminal code. So right now we're using the criminal code, we're using the domestic abuse eradication law, we are using the children's protection law, and the anti-human trafficking and the witness protection. But again, the arguments that we have, for example, would be that we do not have enough of restitution or of protection in place, and also rehabilitation, and this is another thing that we need to to make a distinction between the two. It would be that rehabilitation is for the perpetrators, but the healing aspect is for the victims.
That's right. Yeah.
That's true.
That's right. And I think the thing is, a lot of people are saying, okay, we have these laws. Why do we need new ones? It would just contradict it. But I think this is a huge misconception as well. And I think our listeners would need to know this. We're not contradicting it. We're complementing it, because all the laws that you mentioned,
that's a good way to put it.
I've reviewed it. I've read it. It's not as comprehensive as what the RUU Penghapusan KS is saying. So we're not contradicting. We're complementing. We're putting things that aren't there. Right now, our criminal code, we don't have sexual harassment. We have rape, yes, that's true. We have
Oh,
assault, we
but we
have
have to
neglect,
be
yes.
and we have to explain this as well.
Yeah,
Rape, they literally just mean penetration.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
anything
yes,
that is not penetration uh, is not considered as rape. Is not considered as sexual abuse. Okay,
yeah,
so you can just imagine everything besides that, which is
yes.
what Reina means.
I think
Exactly. And the fact that it's so it's too focused, it's too definitive, it is easy for loopholes. And that's the problem. And we need a law that is more that makes it more broad, that makes it more harder for people to, commit crimes and find a loopholes for it. Oh, because it's not regulated. Oh, I mean, that's not what it is. I didn't do that.
Yeah,
That's what we're trying to
but
prevent.
you know what the naysayers are also saying.
Yeah.
You know what they're using as like when I tell them like, oh, we need this in place. They're saying that, oh, you're just going to create more criminals, those who don't deserve. Because as you said, right, Reina, you mentioned about how people who whistle can be, like basically criminalized. It's like no, we like that's what the discussion is all about. We can ensure that there's a warning in place first, and then there are certain things that need to be put in place where it's clear that a
Yeah.
crime has been committed and it's more than just once,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It needs to be more than just once in terms of the verbal harassment and all that. But you know what they seriously, you know what the naysayers, I mean, those who are against this, they're basically just like, oh my gosh, all the law that are in place are not being implemented, so what's the hope of this one being implemented?
I think the thing that people tend to forget though is like when we look at the law and why it's made, it's because time goes by, society develops in different ways, and therefore when we have RUU PKS, when we have all these new laws, it's to meet the new society demands. Like contohnya even RUU Kepailitan is being made. Why? Because the previous one no longer works. They've acknowledged that. So I think it's more also to what Reina was saying. It's like yes, there are laws in place, but one, it's been a long time. Like you said, KUHP has been 12 years. Things are getting moving, things are going changing, and I think at the end of what it is that we are in the baseline of where we can be in countries like Finland, like Sweden. They're more progressive because they've gone through that. We're now in like that dirt part stage where we're still trying to fight for that. I think that's the thing that the people need to remember the most. It's interesting because whenever we see like what the law actually is, the perpetrators have always been there. It's not that they're increasing. They've always been there. It's just now that they're being held accountable for their actions. I mean, example wise, when I was growing up, all of us were growing up, if you did something wrong, you were punished. You were put into timeout, or you were grounded, you were told to do stuff. It's the same form that's happening now, just in a bigger scale. I think that's what people need to remember the most. Like when we're doing these things, what is the function? Why are we doing? There's intention behind all of it. But of course, at the end, it's gonna bring us somewhere that's forward and progressive. And I think everyone just has to remind that the ideologies can always be different.
But back again, honey, back again, in Indonesia, some people do not like the word progressive.
That's true. That
Yeah,
is
we
true.
need
Okay.
to remember that. Yeah.
So because there's like a stigma in place with
Mm,
the whole progressive and blah blah. It means they're afraid that we're leaving behind the traditions and the culture,
which
right?
exactly, we're helping accommodate it. We're complementing it to what we need to happen now.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I've been blue in the face and I've foamed in the mouth. So
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
talked all I can talk with this issue, and I'm basically just being honest and truthful now. Whenever I talk to people, and I just say, look, unless we can have those clerics, unless we can have those religious people behind this, and I'm talking about people, of course, are they're the public figures, right? if
Mhm.
Yeah.
if if they if they can be behind this, then we can start turning the tide. Otherwise, then it will be an issue where it's an ideological battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, now you've talked about exactly what it needs to be done, but I think we need to also know about what can we do. I mean, you as a legislator, you've done a great deal. You've lobbied for this. I think whenever we see the news and we look at all this opposition, we are frustrated at home. So we can imagine how you were in the front lines, right? But I mean, what we
Thank
want to
you.
know, yeah, we really appreciate that. But we want to know exactly what can we do. I mean, we have the social campaigns. I mean, I'm very happy to see in social media there are a lot of people fighting for this, a lot of social campaigns and everything. What do we need to keep doing? I mean, we'd like that message from you for our listeners.
Yeah. So in terms of the lobbying, I think there are certain people who have, if you have the access to certain organizations, to certain public figures or representatives, I mean, this is kind of the same as even if you're in America or you're in you're in Australia or you're in UK. If you want to lobby something, you have to identify who you need to lobby. So ensure that you do your research. Don't be lazy. Find who is your representative and go to them and ask why they're not supporting this bill. And then if you do your research right, you'll be able to answer any of their concerns as well.
Yeah.
And the most effective way also to lobby is if you bring along with you, you're not just alone, but you bring along with you a substantial number of people. And you show that, hey, we're representing this organization, this organization, this organization, this organization, and this many people in your constituency, and blah 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 blah. So that you have to talk their language. You can't be arguing from a completely different wavelength. If you want to get them to understand where you're coming from, you need to understand where they're coming from. I mean, that's communication 101.
Yes.
And then, aside from doing your research and finding out about this bill and what it's actually fighting for and what it will provide for victims and their families and what it will mean for perpetrators, and then you reach out to those who are in power or your representatives or your or just public figures, especially religious figures. Then I would also suggest, if you have skills, for example, in social media, as in design, right? You can help design, like a flyer that explains, pasal satu, pasal dua, explains the chapters. It explains like the important, things that we're fighting for in this bill. And if you're an influencer, you have a following, use that platform to ensure that like you put stuff in there anytime you have new information on the issue, etc. So this is we use what we have. We basically identifying and then go with it. So that would be my input.
And there is hope.
Yeah, there is definitely hope.
I would hope so. We do have hope, but that so many of my colleagues, the activists, they're all like, we need your voice in this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I already gave all the voice and all the I've done all that. Like they don't need to hear more from me. They need to hear more from other people.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
Because if it's the same people who talk about this, they think it's just us.
Yeah.
So the more people talk about this, the more people will see that it is affecting and it is important for that many people.
And that is in that way that we always need to speak up, and I think that's one of the greatest things that makes me happy about having like a podcast like Uncovering Indonesia, is because we're able to speak up about all of these things, and this is what we're doing right here. One of them is that we're speaking up about it,
Absolutely. So we're all on the same page in terms of using our platforms, right? For the greater good. So I think time is, it's been an hour.
Just put it up.
Wow, time really flies.
Yes, right. When you're talking about something important.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate as well for giving me the chance to talk about this. It's a very important issue. So hopefully people will tune in and they'll learn more about this. Don't let the education stop here though. To all of you who are watching, go and look up, look up and learn.
There's a lot of reliable sources that can help you in English and Indonesian podcasts as well. Those are one of them.
Yes. And always, you can always reach out to us as well if you have any questions or follow-ups. I mean, we would really love.
Yeah, she's a lawyer. Reach out to her.
We actually made a little post about it, like explaining the rights, what are the rights for victims, the protection that are afforded to them. So we see that it's important, guys. So we need to push for the discussion. Continue Sara's work.
That's always
we can't do anything unless it's being discussed.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the fun parts about all these episodes, because we have this thing where afterwards we're always going to talk about the summary of it. What is the law? How can you actually use it? What does it actually mean for you? And I think a lot of times when we see all these sources, we don't know which one's true, because of course, just like Washington Post, just like CNN, they're all inputting their own opinions to it. So what's actually there, what is actually it's not always going to be the case. So that's why we always love, we're trying to be the most objective as possible. And so head on up.
And you guys can always contact Komnas Perempuan, which is like and they're one of the ones that, so it's really funny that they're saying like, oh my gosh, it's the West who actually like proposed this bill. And they're, it's like, you do realize they're actually a government agency. Yeah. So it's like, anyways, so yeah. So you can go reach out to quite a few civil societies and ask for the draft, so that you can read the bill and you can you can make your own conclusions from it. But don't think that just because something is being said one way, right, it means that it's legalizing something else. It's like that doesn't work that way. Basically this is a lex specialis is specifically on sexual abuse. So we're not going to cover stuff that's to do with ideologies, so it's like, if it's done with abuse in mind, then it fits the motive.
It goes.
Fits the bill.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, and thanks so much, guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just one quick thing. I think we need to also remind people when they're reading articles, take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes the articles are quoting those people that are against it. They're saying, and that's important, because again, we can't just listen fully to them. We need to learn about it ourselves, and so not always rely
critical
on
thinking.
Critical
thinking.
That's the one thing
that is a skill.
Yes,
it's a skill.
But thank you so much for having us, and thank you for agreeing to talk with us. This has been an amazing.
And thank you for having me on yours too. So so this is mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I love this.
Thank you, girls.
So amazing.
Thank you, girls. Thank you, Reina, and of course, Kalista. It's so great to have you girls here, and I'm so grateful that there are other ladies out there and other women out there who are picking up the torch and continuing the fight and basically educating people and using your platform to educate people, as even those who are abroad, and using it for the greater good. I mean, this is what it's all about. Change starts with us. And that's also why Let's Talk with Sara is here. And I want to say thank you to all of you who have tuned in and who have followed us. And I thank you as well for supporting this channel by clicking like and subscribe, because the more of you who follow me and subscribe to this channel means I can continue to give you this content and and make it sustainable as well. So thank you so much, all of you, and thank you again, girls, and I'll see you again soon, hopefully, and stay safe, right? Everyone, drink lots of water, exercise, keep your health up, and ensure that you stay safe. Just because the lockdown's kind of semi-lockdown's over doesn't mean that it's safe. So just make sure that all of you take care of yourself. So thank you again, and I'll see you on the next Let's Talk with Sara.
I kind of want to put a quick shout out also.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Uncovering Indonesia, just as Let's Talk with Sara is as important, we also want to help you with that torch. We're going to continue and help you with that torch, to trying to bring out all the most important trends, what's actually law saying about them. And so check them out, uncovering.indonesia.
So there you go, you've heard it. Go check out Uncovering Indonesia Podcast, people. Wait, what's the full thing? Was it, how do they find you?
Our Instagram handle is at uncovering.indonesia. So it's just that. It's just a simple.
All right. And you can follow them and find all the information that they provide there. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to them. Great. Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thank
I'll see you on the
you.
next
Thank you
Let's
so
Talk with
much.
Sarah. Bye.